an economist, and creative entrepreneur. Today we'll be looking at job security post-COVID-19. That's a major talking point in this period. Also, I have here Mr. Bolson Wofaye, who is still remaining with us.
Thank you.
To discuss much around the markets and economy, and particularly jobs. Jobs period. CEO of the Africa Reports.
Agree. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get on to Mr. Tunji Andrews, we're happy to reconnect with Mr. Yomi Olugbero, partner and West Africa tax leader, Deloitte Nigeria. We had an earlier conversation, 9 a.m., looking at tax and fiscal stimulus measures. We just want to wrap up with him because a lot of things to gain insight from in this period. So, Mr. Yomi.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Nice to have you back. Briefly, before we continue with our market review, we'd like you to just respond to the document from the Central Bank of Nigeria, where it's looking at turning tragedy into an opportunity for a new Nigeria, and the bold idea of setting up an InfraCo PLC with a take-off equity debt capital of about 15 trillion naira, designed to support the federal government in its drive to provide robust transportation infrastructure that can help transform our agriculture and other economic activities in the country. And then speak to the issues around VAT. You know, some countries are reducing VAT. There are debates about that in Nigeria, and give us insight into what that means for us at this time.
Right, thank you very much. I think the document from the CBN is quite a very detailed and quite comprehensive from a monetary authority's perspective in terms of the intervention that the monetary authority is looking at. So quite a number of unorthodox but also very bold initiatives. I like the idea of, you know, segregating the intervention into various phases. So there are some immediate measures that we need to make within the first 3 months, some of which have already been rolled out with the various moratorium and forbearances, you know, and all of that. And then there is the rest of the measure, which will be over a 1-year period. Those are the ones that are called short-term measure. That's where the InfraCo PLC with the 15 trillion set of funds, you know, came in. The idea of that job starting the economy back into you know, focus on infrastructure, you know, building rail and power infrastructure, focus on health, focus on education, you know, and all of that. So we have those immediate measures, we have the short-term measure, we have the medium-term measure, some of the measures we will need to take over the next 3 years. So quite a handful of policy measures there that we need to implement. But I think what's very critical to me is that I think we need to consider a much broader coordinated policy response measure. You know, something in the form, you know, an economic recovery and growth plan like we had during the immediate past recession, or a national development plan. So this will help us to coordinate the efforts of the monetary authorities, from the Ministry of Finance, Budget, National Planning, and all of the regulatory agencies, tax authorities, the customs, you know, and other. I think we need to do that. We can achieve a lot more with a more coordinated policy response, so that all that the monetary authorities are thinking about can be brought in as inputs, you know, measures that the fiscal authorities are thinking about. Of finance, you know, budget and national planning, and then what other regulatory responses should be, you know, from tax to custom, and how we're going to, you know, response cost further than, you know, focusing on different authorities, you know, making their pronouncements.
All right, so in terms of the VAT debate, what can you share with us when we look at Other African countries like Kenya reduced their VAT from 16% to 14%. For Nigeria, what is the scenario at this point?
So again, regulatory responses are quite context-based. So you need to look at each of the economy and what they are doing, what the size of their fiscal buffer is, what is the size of the economy, and what they've been doing. So in Nigeria particularly, I think one of the keys that we must almost consider simultaneously as part of the policy measure response is the Finance Act. And that's why, when the Minister of Finance was rolling out the fiscal measure, she did mention that quite ahead of the outbreak, Nigeria had already, conceptualized and implemented a number of reforms, which in a way would have been, part of the immediate responses that government have rolled out, like the tax rebate for tax exemption for small businesses, reduction in tax rate for micro businesses, and all of the measures around exempting small businesses from the administrative burden, of charging and remitting VAT. So a number of measures are already in place, and it will be quite challenging to focus on what government should do on the VAT side alone without looking at the measures that are already on the table. But that notwithstanding, I would say that as part of the overall response, when we contain this medical emergency and the health crisis we have in our hands, we must also articulate a lot more deeply what more can we do from a tax response perspective. So, because for example, the rebates that we're talking about from an income tax perspective for small businesses are essentially targeted at limited liability companies, but at a small scale. So what are we going to do from a payroll tax cost perspective? So if an individual that are earning salary, with all of the impact of inflation or recession or the challenges that they will be thrown into, what are we going to do from a payroll tax cost perspective? So finance didn't conceptualize that. Micro small business has some relief, but so also large corporates, have their own challenges to battle with in order to keep jobs, and all of that. So I think the only policy measure that has been announced or that is in the works is the one that is included in the fiscal stimulus bill. So there is a job tax relief that is meant to cater for businesses that retain their employees over the next 9 months. So, but before we get into drawing a announcement from regulatory authority, for me, I think coordination is perhaps our most essential task. So I know we need to act very fast, but we also need to be more coordinated so that the measures are well thought through. The connectivity, with the pronouncement of different agencies are properly that.
When you give your conversation and interventions on tax and fiscal policy measures in this period. Thank you. That was Mr. Yomi Olubero, partner and West African tax leader at Deloitte, Nigeria, joining us here in Lagos. Next, we'll now have Mr. Tunji Andrews, the economist and creative entrepreneur, who will be discussing with us a very interesting topic, jobs post-COVID-19. What should we be expecting in this period? So, Mr. Boson, what would you have to say in that reaction to Mr. Yomi?
Okay, what Yomi's closing thoughts, I agree with him that we need policy coordination. We need it more than anything else. But what I saw from the central bank latest policy priorities document was that it must have been taken from the same hymn book of the federal government. And I think without necessarily stating it in black and white, I could read between the lines of the 27-page document released last night that yes, this was singing from the same hymn book, meaning that the federal government must have had a hand in it. Again, there's been meetings going on right now. All the key economic managers are having sleepless nights right now. I'm not sure if any one of them is having extra sleep, extra hours of sleep. I spoke with a few late last night when I received the document, and all of them, the lines were busy. They were up. It took a whole long time for me to be able to reach one or two top government officials last night. So all of them, the lines were busy. Both we're going to call you back in 2, 3, 5 minutes. It takes 10 minutes to clarify some of the position. So from the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to the Office of the Vice President, to that of PEBEC, to that of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, to the Office of Mr. President himself, to the Special Advisors on Economic Matters, including the Central Bank and all the Deputy Governors. I'm not sure any one of them is having extra sleep right now because the whole world is on fire. And no thanks to the virus. And then that is wreaking havoc on the markets. We did the OPEC deal, but look at crude oil now below 20. We're all in the water. So this is no time for anyone to sleep. So this is no time for policymakers or monetary policy authorities or anyone to take a break. This is not the time. So I'm sure that everyone will be crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So I'm of the view that the policy coordination that the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee has spoken about for most of last year is at work. What the MPC had said over the last 2 years or so was that the fiscal authorities should do more. Not that they are not coordinating or that they are not talking to each other. And I see a lot more. If you look at the way, even since Kemi Adeosun was the former finance minister, there had been plans between the DMO, the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance and National Planning to reduce Nigeria's domestic borrowings so that we can restructure our debt portfolio locally, and that had worked to some extent. So there's a coordination here. Yeah. In terms of agriculture, you have seen the central bank intervention involve the former agric minister and the agric ministry. So you've seen that on video and in the press. So there's a measure of policy coordination going on. What is missing is that the speed at which some of the MDAs are working is not at par with some others. So some then need to be a little bit more energetic. They need to be more visible and visible for every right reasons. We need to see more from them. The monetary authorities and the financial markets are the ones having much of the sleepless night from what I could see over time. Because the bankers committee, the banks and others are having sleepless nights. The stock exchange trying to keep investors speed up a lot more.
Yes, they have to speed up.
They need to speed up a lot more.
Particularly at a time that jobs
are at stake, yes.
Mr. Tunji Andrews, good morning.
Great, nice to have you on the show.
Great to be on the show. I hear that Ebo Balson is also there in the studio with you.
Yes, you can hear him during his intervention.
It's a pleasure to have two big men, Yomi and Tunji Andrews, on the show this morning on WebTV NG.
Good morning. Yeah, for people who do not understand what a caro means, it means good morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that we're all not adding much weight during this period. Tunji, it looks like you've added a bit more weight because the gyms are closed.
Do some personal training.
We all have to get a new weight measures, but when this is over, the gyms will be buzzing. I got an old treadmill, the manual one, moved from the basement up to the balcony a few days ago. My wife pushed me to this, and the two small boys, this is trying to get me on the meal, on the treadmill to lose some weight. My wife says, well, I'm feeding you more, you're eating more at home than you previously did. So now you have to get on the treadmill. So why do you have to add a treadmill to it? He said, well, you're eating more 3 times a day or 4 times a day, Bosin. Get on the treadmill on the balcony and lose some of the weight. It's a very hard one, but I'm still trying to work at it. She's creating jobs for me at home. My wife is creating jobs.
Oh,
solid.
So, Mr. Tunji.
Yeah.
Let's get to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm asking if you can see me.
Well, you could set to the center stage. You will be able to see your camera.
Okay.
All right. So tell us about the situation. Unemployment prior to now has been over 23.01% in the country. And that is a huge challenge for Nigeria. In this COVID-19 pandemic era, government needs to really act in terms of its fiscal and monetary policy measures to ensure that we don't have a spike of
unemployment, which could bring to us a very serious social challenge. What are your thoughts on this whole development around the pandemic and its implication for unemployment in Nigeria?
So there are many layers to it. I think the government, I want their response because it's a multi-layered scenario. There is the part where I mean, you want to look at the kind of employment we have in Nigeria. Even if you look at the National Bureau of Statistics numbers, we have underemployment and unemployment as a consideration for jobs in Nigeria. And so you're looking at people who have white-collar jobs in 95. And even within those 95s, there are the classifications of which kind of 95 you're particularly into. So then you leave there and then you go to the kind of people who are living on a daily wage, people who are your plumbers, your carpenters, your mom and pop shops around. These are jobs that are all over the economy. And if you look at the largest employer of labor in Nigeria, the largest single employer of labor, it has to be the SME sector as a whole, you know. And there is no how jobs will not be lost in this time. I'm talking about from people who are self-employed to people who are working in offices, because in this last 2 weeks, people have not been able to go to work. For the next 2 weeks, people won't be able to go to work. It will be difficult for businesses to keep people on for the entire period this is going on. Who knows, even after these 2 weeks, if we will not have an extension. So the thought at the back of my mind is that the fiscal authorities. I heard Yemi talking about the monetary authorities, and I heard your discussion with him about the response yesterday. You see, it's not nearly enough, because that is a monetary response. There needs to be a fiscal response. There has to be policy response in terms of what happens to employees, what happens to employers that keep their staff on. Because it will be difficult. There's no business in Nigeria that is not, except of course maybe the multinationals, there's no business in Nigeria that isn't on a shaky leg. So this in itself is just trying to sweep many businesses off their feet. And many of them have already started to lay off. Many of them have already started to speak to their staff about reducing salaries and things like that. So at the back of my mind, I'm saying, like Boston was saying, this is no cause for control. Everything is under alarm. If the fiscal authorities don't realize that they need to act and act very fast right now, then it might just be too late. But I do believe that they are looking at it, because I'm hearing from the CBN's response yesterday, at least you kind of feel that something is going on and some people are looking at the numbers well.
Now, looking at that CBN document, Mr. Tunji, we've talked
around issues like an InfraCo PLC, which will help to lay the infrastructure for transport that can galvanize economic activities, and then other areas of supporting federal government policies, driving growth and economic development. What are your thoughts around this document and how it can really at this time support jobs, which is very key for economy?
So an InfraCo in principle, it makes sense. We need, and this is what we need in almost every sector. So I was in South Africa recently, and you know, I was looking at, I took a tour of the country, and I was looking at what their agricultural sector is. So you know, in South Africa, they don't talk much about agriculture. There's no noise about agriculture. But in Nigeria, it's our mantra every 2 minutes. Oh, we are farming, we're farming, we're farming. What I realized that was the actual difference, and if you want to even check by numbers, South Africa seems to be producing a lot more than we are, is that they have large-scale farmers, very large-scale farmers, farmers of the size of Boa Cement, farmers. I'm talking about large-scale farmers who then hire the little farmers here and there. What we have in Nigeria is peasant farmers, smallholder farmers who are basically trying to feed their own families and then doing a little bit extra for the market. So when there's a shake like this, those kind of people get easily affected as against the large-scale farmers who have a large infrastructure, who have large capacities, who have large credits that they can draw on with the banks. So, like I said, an infraco in itself is good as an idea. So it's pretty much like what I was talking about the agriculture. You know, you want the big companies that can, you know, swallow up shakes and, you know, bump like this. So it's good in itself. But the question is, what is the workability of this? How will it work? Is the fiscal side completely with it? Should the fiscal side be driving it? Because I don't think this is what the CBN should be driving. You know, this is Nigeria where we start a policy discussion and we get halfway and then we realize that some people were not carried along and then we shut it down. My question is, who is driving this particular agenda? Will it work? Will it see the light of day? We remember the time when Obasanjo was trying to push what's the agenda of a super conglomerate. We saw the birth of what's the name of Transcorp. So we see where that has ended. You know, we don't know where Transcorp is. It's neither here nor there. So for me, at the back of my mind, I keep thinking this sounds good on paper. And Boss would also benefit. We were both seated in the room when the recovery plan document was being, and we were both contributors to that document. And I remember both of us saying to ourselves, man, this is the same document over again. In fact, Boss was even pointing me to the fact that this was Vision 2020. I wasn't part of that, so I didn't know much about that. It was like, you know, this is this document all over again. And, you know, we are years down the line. It's a failed document now. So while I am a great believer in the fact that we can do stuff, I just always want to know who the drivers of every agenda is so that I can, you know, better judge how far it will go. Because if the driver is not the person that is holding the wheel, then it will just be rhetoric and we'll just, you know, go around in circles and come back to where we were.
Okay, so you want to...
I think, Tunji Andrews, your concerns are very, they're well thought out. What I see here, and this is the way from a few conversations I had over the last couple of hours with some of the top officials about this Infraco PLC. If we see it as a vehicle, the document says it's going to be run by an independent fund manager. It's not a commission. It's not a commission. It's not going to be run by the federal government. What the central bank is trying to do is to help the government via infrastructure that cuts across transportation, power, and whatever, and get the confidence and the trust and believability that has been a little bit missing. The missing link between the private sector and the government in terms of bringing money to the table by using the financial markets mechanism and platforms to raise the fund. So that is what is being done here. So Infraco PLC will be, it's not the same as Transcorp or so. What the central bank, and from explanations I got, and I spoke to some, about 2 or 3 highly placed people within the central bank last night, is that the central bank will talk to the markets and deep pockets financial institutions to say, look, can you guys put 1.5 trillion naira together as a first takeoff fund, okay? The target is about 15 trillion. So let's do 1.5 trillion. The central bank, to the best of my knowledge at this point in time, is not putting a dime into that, but ensuring that investors, the pension fund fund administrators, the insurance companies, the banks, and other deep pocket individuals who wants to buy into this special purpose vehicle like an SPV is to give them that confidence to lend. Okay? So that is the takeoff. Then they can target 15 trillion. How these funds is deployed will be because it's run by an independent fund manager, which should be a market institution, okay? That means that it will be a little bit like the NIDF, which is run by, floated by Chapel Hill Denham, by Bolaji Balogun and his team, which is a very good example of how things could be done. Over the last few years, I have advocated severally that we should have a focused infrastructure fund for Nigeria, but it looks like the government, yes, but the government can't do it. Folks are worried that if contracts, whatever, are awarded within that space, there could be change of government, the lack of integrity, and what have you. So the Infraco PLC, operationally speaking, is a market-based fund. Because it's a PLC and it's by independent fund manager, it will be listed. And I think that is, I just take it as given that it will go straight to FMDQ or Nigerian Stock Exchange or both for listing. So when you use the regulatory platform of the SEC and perhaps the debt office, the debt management office, and a few other government agencies to support this infrastructure company PLC, then it will not be bogged down, or it will not be, it's not part of a government. And I got that clarity last night, Tunji. It's not a government intervention. It's far away from Transcorp or ERGP. This is the central bank saying, and I have a sense that perhaps the central bank must have spoken to banks, investors, and others. And they have said, look, we want to partner with the government when it comes to infrastructure. But we're not too comfortable if you look at the Babalaki and the Bicotany.
Nigeria's economy with someone like you, because you've been following this. I think, if I correct, at least 20 years. You've been following the economy for at least 20 years. I've just been around for like maybe 5-6 years, and I've been paying attention. And the general context, the general challenge people had is, should this particular thing coming from the central bank is coming from the CBN governor. The question is how directly keyed into is the federal government, because do not forget, an infrastructure project still needs sign-off from the government. Do not forget, we just saw the government sack a few contractors for not just handing out cash transfers. We've seen government take back. You spoke about Babalaki with by Courtney, with the Lagos Ibadan Expressway. We saw that with the MM2. We've seen this over and over again. And you know, for me, one of the biggest successes with public-private partnerships in Nigeria that the concession company, but somehow we're able to truncate that before it became the dream that we hoped it would be. Because sometimes it might not be. You want to let the next person trust you that you will go through with your word, you go through with it. And if you're going to, you know, spend a few extra billions, and you do that because you want to give the next person assurance that if you sign off with me, I'll go with it. So the question now is, what is the new thing with this Infraco that is different from Bicotany, that is different from LCC, that is different from Transcorp, that is different from everything we've ever seen?
Okay, now the point is here. Is this. Nigeria has never had a very good record when it comes to integrity of contracts and things like that. So there's a very sanctity of contract. It's very the believability index is -0. I don't know how many zeros down, but it's below the water. It's in the water, to use the market expression phrase. So I want to believe that, and I'm sure you know that by now, so everybody should know that by now, that the central bank governor and Mr. President are jolly good fellows. He got his second term. That means that the Mr. President believes in him.
Which is not necessarily a good thing, but it is true.
No, I agree with. I understand. That is. I think that is it. So it's as far as your fingers can go to the middle of your back. So we may revisit all of these moving forward. But right now, administration came in 2014, 2015, and the roof came in, and we had a recession. Now within the 4 years, another recession is here, whether we like it or not. So I think we must all agree that we are now in a very tight situation. We haven't gotten out of the 2016 recession completely. We haven't been able to do the critical structural shift that we have within the economy. I was reading the Africa Report magazine published from France, from Paris, the daily briefing, which I get in my email, Atunji and Yomi. And some of the comments there was that, look, there's no better time for Nigeria now to ramp up on its economic diversification. Let Nigeria just say we have come to the end of oil. Simple. Let's just address in public. And I think that is a little bit of what the central bank was trying to push forward here. From what I saw in that 27-page document, and I read it word for word overnight, I couldn't remember when I went to bed. It was early this morning. Was that this must come from the same hymn book, the same page of the fiscal government. I'm sure it is not something just designed within the central bank and implementing without consulting with the presidency. And when I mean the presidency, between the vice president, the Economic Advisory Council, and Mr. President himself. I don't think the central bank governor and the other deputy governors will go ahead and put this together without consulting one way or the other with folks within the government as to how this will work moving forward. So far, what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, or since the administration started, was that there has been a very good coordination between the president and the central bank. Now, so as far as this is concerned, Tunji, I'm sure you agree that right now the Nigerian government could hardly, will need all the help it can get, even within the government itself. So the government, the presidency will have to look for the best of its agencies that still has a measure of credibility and integrity that can talk to the market. I just saw right now that this afternoon, the Rwandan president, His Excellency Paul Kagame, had a virtual meeting with international investors, which was organized by Invest Africa, which is an organization that links international investors with those who want to do business in Africa. That is President Kagame having a virtual meeting and asking international investors, what can you do for Nigeria? And I just put that on my Twitter handle, and I said, look, can we do the same thing? But again, if you ask me which agency of the government can do a virtual meeting right now and ask international investors, I'm sure those that the international investors would want to see their faces and hear their voices, the central bank will be one of them. There are few government agencies as of today that can talk to international investors with confidence and integrity and a measure of believability as to what can be done for Nigeria.
Okay, so Mr. Tunji,
I agree totally.
Coming to policy.
I agree.
Yeah. So coming to policy, Mr. Tunji, from the president's where he announced the lockdown for another 14 days, he talked about coordination now between the Economic Sustainability Committee, the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, and several ministers like that of Science and Technology, Education, Works and Housing, Power, all working together to see how they can strategize COVID-19 and the Nigerian economy. So at this point, this ties also to addressing the challenge of unemployment. What would you be expecting from this new round of coordination of policy to address a very teething issue like unemployment in Nigeria?
We do not have such a funnel in Nigeria where we can just go to one place, pour the water in, and then it will wet the entire economy. I'm hoping that this infraco can be that. But when the president spoke about the coordination of relevant agencies within his office, the first thought on my mind is I hope that that conversation has started long before he came and had that speech, because they should have been having the speech the minute they realized that we're going to be having a global pandemic, and they should have been preparing for it. Side by side, see what was happening with global crude oil prices, OPEC plus, Saudi Arabia, US, Russia. They should have been doing that a lot longer. Also, I'm hoping to the Economic Advisory Council. I'm also hoping to see how much involved they are in that coordination, so that we can be able to have a robust response to this. Because not only is it important for us to all be singing from the same hymn book, it is important that what is coming from that hymn book is clear to us as individuals and clear to investors. Because, and I'll explain why this is important. Because if you have a clear agenda, so America's agenda is simple. The Fed will do whatever it takes to get the American economy running again. That's simple, straight to the point. What they're saying is that they will print whatever it needs to do. They will borrow if it needs. They will do whatever it takes to get the American economy running. We need to have such a clear policy direction that whatever, when a foreign investor hears it, he knows where to plug in immediately, so that he can be able to get the very best out of the Nigerian economy and be able to just, plug his money to two places and know that this is where this is what he's going to get back from it. Without that, if we don't have investors, then we're pretty much in the same place. Get jobs, we have to have a clear policy direction, not just clear, but concise in the fact that it is clear to even foreign investors, and in such a way that immediately they know where to plug in their money, and the money can easily then trickle down, and then it can affect jobs, it can affect you and I, it can affect us and our local communities. That is a long road, but that road is so long that you need the beginning points to be so clear that the money gets in quicker. That's where I'm coming from.
When we look at the implications for businesses,
this time, because if a business is not functioning, if operations are not there, they have a challenge of keeping and retention of employees. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Mr. Tunji, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I was talking about businesses, and you mentioned earlier about small medium enterprises who are major employers of labor, particularly in our country too.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
So I was talking about businesses in the country who are very active in the economy, employing people and contributing to the GDP. This is a challenging time for them, and we're already seeing some layoffs and messages of no longer needing services for this period. This is a challenging time as it adds to the unemployment data. What we'll be saying this period to businesses in terms of managing this challenge? What policy interventions? Take, for example, the aviation industry was hit. Projection shows over $200 billion will be lost this year for the global, and Nigeria has also a billion naira loss projection. That industry will face challenges in terms of retention of employees and operations. What should we be looking at in terms of interventions to ensure that this sector continues to operate and helps to engage employees and drive economic activities?
Mr. Tunji, can you hear me?
It's a very hard, it's a very tasking situation to be able to ask at this time because yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You can go on.
I'm not even going to lie that it's going to be it's going to be an easy time for businesses because I mean, because the fact is that many of them already have issues, infrastructure issues.
Yes, I can hear you.
That will make life easier for them. So let me just pick up a hypothetical case. A business that is into making of carbonated drinks, right? So what are you going to do for that carbonated drink company to make them keep their staff? Is it that you're going to make power cheaper? Is it that you're going to give them a tax rebate? Is it that you're going to incentivize them for keeping their staff? Is it that you're going to make loans more accessible to them? So you see, the problem is the issues already existing are so multifaceted that I don't think we can think of individual sectors. What we need to do is find the quickest way for money to go around the economy, and if it is to get a pumping machine to put in a particular place so that the money goes round, it has to go around quickly. It has to go around now. It's a situation whereby I mean, if let's leave a carbonated drink making company, go to a Boa Cement, for instance. Boa Cement has several factors of production. They have the people there. They have the limestone which they have to mine. They have what you call it. They need an LPFO or coal to get to their factory to be able to make it work. So all of this put together is a situation whereby you find what exactly would you take off the table to make life easier for a business. So I think this is the time where you want to speak to people like Yomi and other tax or coordinators who see who see the books of companies day to day and know what are the heaviest points in the business to just throw money at this issue It has to be a coordinated effort.
Yes, I can hear you. Mr. Tunji, can you hear me?
Yeah, it has to be a coordinated effort in such that yeah. So in the way that it can touch everybody. It will not be the sense of it, but at least if it touches a few companies, those companies can then continue doing things that they normally do, and that will hopefully touch everybody. So, for instance, if I were to, let's say, give company A tax rebate or just a tax break altogether, that company A knows that that's 20 million naira, or 15 million naira, or even 10 million naira, or 5 million naira taking off their books for that year. They know that they can put that 5 million naira maybe into advertising or hiring new people or just keeping their old staff. That 5 million naira translates into bigger and larger things in the Nigerian economy. But I also think that we need to find injection points across board. Uh, I'm not sure this is the greatest time to increase power prices. I'm also not sure that. Well, I'm going into very delicate territories right now. I agree that this is the best time to take the hardest decision. But I believe that if we're going to start taking those hard decisions, we have to go all the way to the end. So my point is still tax breaks, cheaper access, cheaper factors of production, wherever the government can plug in. That is what we need right now, especially for the larger corporations, so that those corporations can then pass money on to the smaller corporations, and then money can go around.
Now, skills is very important at this time.
2008 recession, we saw layoffs, massive layoffs across sectors from the US, UK, even down to Nigeria. And in 2016, the recession also really hit hard on sectors in the economy and activities. This is a period for skills to be developed, to make yourself competitive despite the challenges in the global economy as it's impacted by COVID-19. So what are those key skills that will really, really make people competitive in a very demanding period, particularly in the jobs market?
So one of the things I realized that the COVID-19 has done is that it's low-key accelerated the future. And what I mean by low-key accelerated the future is that the future is web-based. We're going to see a lot of technology being deployed to a lot of things. A lot of us have seen the use of Zoom explode across the world. We're seeing delivery services having more prominence now. A lot of people are using apps more. People are using the websites more. Internet is being used a lot more. Even the telcos are beginning to find themselves being stretched by the amount of data being used in the urban city. And that is generally pointing in the direction of what the future is going to be. Um, there are all sorts of thoughts. Will this last for 2 years? Will this last for 2 months? Will this last for 6 months? However long it's going to last, everybody's indication is that we probably might not go to any level of normalcy till like maybe June. And if that is the truth, then it means that whatever business that can happen without me having to physically contact you, without having to physically interact with you, is what we need to start thinking of. So, for instance, I've seen a lot of people create a lot more content in this time of the lockdown. Although they are creating it for fun, they are creating it just to play and party around with websites like TikTok and the rest. But I think this is the time people need to start looking at those kind of things and creating more content. This is the time where they need to start doing a lot more remote work. Um, I'm I'm glad for this period because one of the things it will do for all of us is that it will tell us that we don't necessarily have to, go from Ikeja to the island for some meetings. We can do it via Skype or Zoom. But basically anything that is remote based, anything that is tech enabled, will be the future for the next 6 months to the long term future. I don't know what the next 2 years will hold, but at least in the immediate future, you're looking at what you can do without having to physically be in the same place with the other person.
Now, Mr. Tunji, despite this pandemic
and the challenges we're
and the
seeing, we're also seeing interesting stories like 54Gene announced yesterday a $50 million investment, a health tech company. That's a positive story amidst the pandemic, and that shows you how health tech will be a key player too in this period, driving activities and also creating job opportunities. Which other sectors do you see positive developments happening this period that can also drive jobs at this time?
Also drive us at this time.
So there are a lot of positives around. First of all, one of the things I've seen is the humanity of everybody. You know, the humanity of all of us have come to the fore. Even people in communities are going around to give food to people around them. So that is a great thing to start with. That just tells you that we are not as even-minded as we would like to believe that we all are. But in terms of more opportunities everywhere, and you know, some of the good news, believe that however this may be, it will leave Nigeria's health sector a little better, a little more organized, a little more structured, a little more um, resourced. Yesterday, I saw pictures of the United Nations bringing in 50 ventilators into Nigeria. Prior to the pandemic, we had only about 200 in the whole country. That's about 1 million people. But right now, with the intervention of some companies here and there, it's been a great sign. And then now we have another 50 extra. So who knows, maybe we'll be able to have a sizable number of ventilators and proper ICU units in Nigeria before at the end of all of this. But that will mean that hospitals will be better prepared for the future. Hospitals will be better equipped. At least if there's anything that is going to benefit from this, it is Nigeria's health sector. As ironic as it is, our politicians are not able to travel abroad for treatment. So it's also made them to also start to look inwards and look at the health sector. What if there's another, maybe now this COVID, maybe the next will be Dovid or something, and they have to be in Nigeria. So everybody's thinking about the health sectors realistically. And I believe that at least if we will not get to world class standard, at least we'll get significantly close.
Now, Tunji, we've also seen across the world social intervention plans also here in Nigeria. But you know, the working class and other straight apart from the poor and vulnerable would need some level of interventions. In Pakistan, we just saw that they gave $70 to about 12 families to manage the challenges this period. If you were in the meeting with the coordinated economic team, discussing with the president, what would be your advice in ensuring that the social intervention plan or any stimulus plan at this point has wider impact on the population? You know, you have a huge young population in the demography.
Sorry, say that again.
I said in this period,
intervention plans across the global economy. For example, in Pakistan, we're seeing $70 given to families. In Nigeria, we're seeing that even apart from the 2.6 million households that have benefited, the poor and vulnerable, 1 million have been added, making it 3.6 million. But we need this to scale and to reach the wider population. We have a demography dominated by younger people. If you had the opportunity to advise the president and the economic coordinated policy team, what would you be advising in terms of ensuring that this is very impactful in this period?
It was from, and I was talking about the fact that children were probably the most vulnerable in this time.
I can hear you. Go on.
What do you say?
It's like I can hear you. You can go on.
Okay. So I was hearing as children are probably the most vulnerable in this time, and the funny thing with it is that it is so true because we're so concerned with ourselves, and human interaction generally that we don't think about the fact that they are the most vulnerable in our society. Also, I mean, I'll come back to the kids and the children, but I was also thinking yesterday about what about the homeless, across the world. Um, how are governments taking care of the homeless? People who are living in the shanties, people who are living in, um, people who can't afford the social distance, people who do not have running water, people who do not have access to clean water, who soap is a luxury to. How are those people going through and managing this particular time? And it got me thinking. It really just got me thinking about what the world is and what the world might be. But as concerns the vulnerable children, I've started hearing parents talk about the fact that maybe they will homeschool for the next 1 year, because if you know anything about schools, you know that once there's a flu going around town, the the petri dish of spreading the germs is schools. I'm talking primary, secondary schools, especially primary and nursery schools, where a lot of the children, cluster, share stuff. They're children, so they don't really the difference with it. They don't really understand the concept of germs. So they're all together, clustered, and then it could spread a lot more. So the fear I have is that, but the good thing about it is that the coronavirus doesn't seem to affect them much. So that is a good thing. But um, they could spread it. They could, just be carriers and spread it to their parents, and who knows what will happen after that. But I mean, let's be real. We don't know much about this coronavirus thing, so we're all learning on the job. And I'm thinking maybe in the next 5 years we'll be in a better position to respond to everything. But right now, we just take it as it goes. Right now, we're just focusing on the most important part, keeping our economies running, saving lives, keeping jobs going, and all of us just basically surviving this very hard time.
Well, all hands has to be on deck. I think going back to the central bank latest policy documents, I think the underbelly of it is how to create jobs. I think we have to deal with two things here: job loss first, then loss of productivity. What we're losing now is we're losing productivity because of the lockdown and stay at home, and then some jobs will be lost. When we get back to business, the some of the folks that Tunji Andu spoke about will hit the ground running. Some of them have contracts and jobs they weren't able to execute because of the lockdown. They will go back into it, to those jobs. Whether those who give them those contracts will be able to meet up the payments is another thing, because everybody will try first to look for money, for some form of income to be able to move things on. But again, if I have jobs and I have to deliver, I hope you also will have what it takes to pay me when I deliver such jobs. So there'll be a bit of a economic buffeting here, flying through very troubled weather, stormy weathers here. So everyone should fasten their seat belts. But like Yomi Olugbenro said, this is the time for policy coordination and for everyone to be on the same page. I share the thoughts and views of Tunji Andrews as well when it comes to how do we get our most vulnerable protected at this point in time and give them what they need for the future, which in particular is the fishing rod. But finally, I was very particular and happy that the central bank governor, in the policy release of the central bank, says this is the time to build a health sector that everyone can be proud of. This is the pandemic that has kept every Nigerian politician and government official at home. So we're all in the same rocky boat, as it were, right now. That is as bad as the pandemic can get, but it gives us an opportunity to build
a better pharmaceutical and healthcare industry moving forward. One of the greatest things you can build, and that you must build, is an industrialized manufacturing and up-to-date healthcare sector.
Industrialized healthcare.
Look, health is wealth. Yep. I'm not trying to sound intelligent here as if I know more than everybody else, but we all know that health is wealth. If that is the truth, what is wealth? That means that you are more productive, we spend more time, and to build such a healthcare sector, you must build roads, you must have electricity. So it all goes around health. If we don't do that, folks are going to get sick. Already Lagos, those of us who live in Lagos were stressed before the pandemic. Yes. Folks were collapsing while driving. We spend hours upon hours burning fuel and blood and water and our mental energy in Lagos vehicles now. When this is over, are we going to return to that same harrowing life and work and leisure situation in Lagos? That's another big question we need to think about moving forward. So this is not just about the pandemic, but the morning after the pandemic. So that's why I support initiatives that will help us fix infrastructure from the government side, the little borrowings we can do, put it there. If you get a private sector, financial services industry, domestic, foreign, to help us fix more. By the time this pandemic is over, and I'm praying it's over by second quarter or so, it will be the middle of the rainy season in Nigeria. And that's another so all Lagos roads everywhere will be heavy. It's going to be tough going out and coming back on a daily basis with the vehicular traffic you'll be expecting in Lagos. So we need to think about this. How do we get the produce from the farms out to the towns and the market? That's going to be the challenges moving forward. So we need to have this critical thinking beyond the healthcare, while we appreciate what everybody is doing down there on the ground, but infrastructure that will help even our healthcare and medical personnel move from towns and cities to remote areas to help midwives. For those who want to help midwives, to those who are pregnant women, to those who need healthcare at those local places, we need to fix all of that as well. So infrastructure is at the heart of everything. Because if you have the drugs, even if it's delivered to you by World Health Organization or UNICEF, how do you put it in a vehicle and get it to remote villages and towns? When you get it there, some of these drugs had to be stored in in a refrigerator also. There's no light, there's no electricity, there's no generator, they can't get fuel. That's a challenge. So it's all a waste. So you take those drugs there, it's goes to total waste. So we're all in a single boat. So health is wealth. It's good that we're taking this on the front burner. And I think I'll leave it at that for today. Yes, the conversation. Oh, by the way, the IMF was not a loan. We're not owing the IMF. Yes, yes. So what we're requesting for is just our money. You know, the economies that receive those are low income. Two countries who have also been approved today. Yeah. I think so monitor that and yes, we'll bring that to that as well. Subsequent updates. Thank you so much. Yes.
So, Mr. Tunji Andrews. All right. So. Would wrap up now. It was nice having Mr. Tunji Andrews, the economist and creative entrepreneur, today discussing about jobs and the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. It was nice to hear his thoughts around that. And of course, Mr. Bosun Omofaye, co-host here and CEO Frontline Africa, Frontier Africa Reports. Yes, and we had a nice, very, very nice, decisive intervention from Mr. Yomi Olugbenro, the tax experts, and of course, the West African leader for Deloitte Nigeria. And that will be all for today's morning session of the Economy and Politics Discourse, Economics, and the Market Review. Join us tomorrow as we continue this conversation. You can also log on to proshareng.com/COVID-19. We have a nice package there for you. We are tracking the developments around COVID-19 and how it affects the markets and economy. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Stay safe.